Hello and welcome to our second Sacred Masculine class on the Aries God Archetype, the Fierce Protector. Mars reached the stage in the sky on November 13th where it went direct, and that indicates the stage in this synodic cycle of where Mars reaches the puberty phase. And the position where Mars went direct was 15 degrees Aries. So we will dive in now and see what that's all about. And I'd like to give a big welcome to Maureen for being present with me here. And hopefully soon we'll have some more people joining us, and maybe even some men will be attracted to this discovery and join us as well. It'd be nice to have that strong masculine energy with us.
Yeah.
So this is the agenda for today. We're going to open sacred space. We're going to talk about the third of the 3 Jupiter-Pluto conjunctions that have happened this year. Because this archetype is so new to us, and because this Mars journey is new to us, we're going to review this Fierce Protector archetype. We're going to look at Aries, the Aries Mars at puberty, and Daniel Gemario calls this stage Mars at puberty. I've added the term adolescence, and I'm going to explain why when we get to that point. Then we're going to look at the stages of the hero's journey and how those are relating to the Mars synodic cycle. This is not supposed, oh yes. Then we're going to have a little bit of closure time on the birth of the new archetype, which is what was activated last month. So we'll just do a little wrap up on that space. And then we're going to go into the stage of the hero's journey that we haven't discussed yet, which is the refusal of the call. And then we'll be looking at the aspects that are happening or that did happen on the 13th. Today is, what are we today? The 14th. So that was yesterday that this happened in the sky. We'll see what the chart looks like, what the theme is. And the truth of the matter is I didn't come up with any vision quest opportunities. But maybe we can make up some while we're here, and I can fill that slide in later. And then we'll look at questions and answers. And the reason why I was stumbling around on some vision quest opportunities is because this is a whole new area of exploration for Maureen and myself. We've been so focused on the sacred feminine up to this point. And this stage of the puberty / adolescence is a little tricky. And so I think that maybe by the time we work through this, and we get to that vision quest slide, that we can come up with some, and then I'll type those in after class, and that slide will be updated on the resources page. And anybody watching this in the future, you'll just have to pause and write those vision quest opportunities down, because in order to have access to the resource page, you have to join the class. So any questions about the agenda, Maureen?
No, looks good.
Okay, great. Okay, let's just dive into it then. So we're going to open sacred space. I'm going to turn my candle on. And I'm going to spray my spray. You're watching this, if you have a spray, or if you want to smudge yourself, or if you have incense to kind of clear your space, you're welcome to do that. I always give credit to Amanda Ellis. I use her sprays. Her guide is Archangel Metatron. She has a fabulous collection of sprays, and I enjoy using those. So because we're having this third Pluto Jupiter conjunction happening the day before we reach the point in the sky where Mars is at puberty, where Mars went direct, we're going to invoke Jupiter. This is a whole new experience for us. In our sacred feminine class, we did an invocation to Juno. She is the consort, in the old fashioned words, the sacred partner of the beloved of Jupiter. So it's worked out really synchronistically to be able to invoke that pair in this month's Sacred Feminine and Sacred Masculine class. And I love this picture of Jupiter. I don't know if you've ever seen any other pictures of Jupiter, but yeah, I do. I just love it. There's a lot of symbology in there that would be a really fun exploration to kind of dive into and see what all that's about. So, Maureen, I'm going to call on you. It's a brief invocation, but I think it's a powerful one.
Okay. I invoke the beneficent power of Jupiter. I call forth your optimism and enthusiasm into my life. Help me to channel broad and abundant divine visions into the reality of my life. Bring to me good fortune so that I may attract and share more fully with others. Yes, I like that too.
Yeah, very nice.
Who's Llewellyn.com?
She is an astrologer, and
Oh.
On her site, she actually has invocations for each of the planets. And it just so happens that Jupiter as a planet, excuse me, Jupiter as a planet is named after, I believe it's the Roman god, right? Jupiter as a Roman god. So
Yes.
that was an interesting synchronicity. I found some other invocations that were like pages and pages and pages long. So I opted for this short but sweet and powerful invocation instead. And the reason why I'm not doing any more of the chanting is because apparently some of the videos are not copyrighted and some of them are, and I don't know how to tell the difference. And if you include a copyrighted video, you get a strike. And so I thought, well, for our personal ones, we can do chanting, but for these, we'll just stick with the tried and true.
That's good. Don't they all have to have that little C at the bottom of them like you do? The little C in the circle?
Honest to goodness, you know, they make up the rules, I think, as they go along.
Oh, okay.
I don't know. There's who knows?
Yeah.
Maybe YouTube has its own rules for how you copyright with them. I just don't know. So
Neither. No.
Since I don't know, I figure better safe than sorry.
Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah. So, here we go. So let's talk about this third Jupiter-Pluto event. So it happened on November 12th. That was the day before Mars turned direct on the 13th. And it happened, that was the day that the Venus gate activation happened. Am I remembering that correctly?
Yes.
I've got so much data in my head and trying to keep the sacred feminine information and the sacred masculine information in two different drawers. It's starting to all kind of merge together for me. So yeah, this was the day of the 5th gate activation for the sacred feminine, the solar plexus gate. And that happened the day before Mars turned direct, where we got at this Mars of puberty stage. So what's interesting is this third Jupiter-Pluto event. Well, I'll just go through how I have it here. So the first thing that we want to ask ourselves, because it's the final event, and this has been happening over the course of the year. So we will ask ourselves, what is it that we are letting go of? And letting go can equate to what is it that we are dismantling? What is it, particularly with this Pluto effect, what is it that we're burning to the ground? Because we know that Pluto is death, rebirth, rising from the ashes. So we're burning something to the ground. And we're doing that so that we can expand in a new way. because whatever we're letting go of, whatever we're burning to the ground, it no longer serves our expansion. And Jupiter is that very expansive, very amplifying energy. And since it's no longer serving our expansion, and thus can be considered, since it's no longer empowering us, thus it's disempowering us, we're letting that go, we're dismantling it so that we can expand in new ways. And when we expand in these new ways, we are thus being empowered in new ways. So this is a good play on the Jupiter-Pluto frequencies merging together. And then as we expand into these new ways, then we are doing that rise from the ashes into the bigger and better. So that's the real question that you want to ask yourself at this time after this third event, because the first two events were preparing us for this huge letting go. And now that the void has been created by the letting go, we know that the universe, the cosmos, cannot, what is the word that I'm looking for? Trying to find my word. It does not tolerate a void. As soon as a void is created, the cosmos has to rush in and fill that void. And so the first two, and now this final one, has created this huge void of the letting go so that this new, bigger and better can rush in and fill that void. Does that make sense to you, Maureen?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. So what's really super spectacular about this is we've talked about this Saturn-Pluto conjunction in the Sacred Feminine classes, and I think in the last Sacred Masculine class, the one that happened at the beginning of the year. And for Maureen and I, this is like upfront and personal for us because this conjunction in Saturn and Pluto happened right next to our birthdays. And so that event has been encoded into our solar return charts for this year. And what that Saturn-Pluto conjunction did is it actually paved the way for these three Jupiter-Pluto connections to do this work of being able to let go, let go, let go in bigger and bigger ways, deeper and deeper ways for this new stuff to come on board. Now with the Saturn-Pluto conjunction, what we're talking about there is the dismantling and the death of all the old and disempowering structures. And because it's in Capricorn on that Cancer Capricorn path, the old and disempowering structures in our families, homes, and communities. And so when we're looking at that area of what's being dismantled, and even the Jupiter-Pluto conjunctions in Capricorn, so we're really looking at that Cancer-Capricorn axis of the path of family, home, and community to see where all of this dismantling and letting go is showing up. So when you're looking at these structures that we have in place for our family, home, and community, you're looking at all of the educational structures, whether they're public schools, whether they're private schools, whether not, nonprofit, higher education, lower education, the free VPK programs for kids, anything that has to do with educational structures, all of our financial structures. So, the World Bank, the Federal Reserve, any other banking systems, any other monetary system that ties into the financial, the governmental structures, judicial structures, medical structures, and of course now we're seeing with the political structure even. So all of that has gotten to the point where it's no longer empowering us and serving our expansion. And when we're talking about our expansion, we mean in terms of the evolution of our consciousness, the expansion of our consciousness at the collective consciousness of humanity level. It's not serving humanity, and therefore it's being dismantled. And with the third Jupiter-Pluto conjunction that just happened 2 days ago, what's really super exciting about this is that it is actually reactivating the very same point in the sky where the Saturn-Pluto conjunction point took place back in January. So for me, to kind of coin a phrase, borrow from Oprah, it's that full circle moment where Saturn activates that point in the sky with its Pluto conjunction, paving the way for the 3 Jupiter-Pluto conjunctions to unfold over the course of the year. And now at the third one, coming full circle back to that point in the sky and amplifying all the work that was done over the course of this year through the Saturn Pluto and the other 2 Jupiter Plutos, and now this final one, amplifying all of our ability to let go, let go, let go, dismantle, dismantle, dismantle. And this is why we're seeing manifestations of certain quote unquote death throes on the world stage in terms of these different types of systems that are no longer serving the collective consciousness of humanity. And so specifically with Jupiter and Pluto, we're looking at old belief systems, excess power, arrogant fanaticism, lawlessness, and no longer allowing the underground, and I'm using code here, the underground sexual taboos to destroy our children.
Yes, absolutely.
Yes. Now, while all of this is happening, we are having this series of eclipses on the Gemini Sagittarius eclipse axis. The eclipses that happened prior to the Gemini Sagittarius eclipse axis were on the Cancer Capricorn axis. And I think that that's particularly relevant because I think that those eclipses that happened on the Cancer Capricorn axis were preparing us for this year, this 2020 year of these big planetary conjunctions between Saturn and Pluto and Jupiter and Pluto on the same axis. And what's interesting is now that we're into this Gemini Sagittarius eclipse season, the second of the 3 Jupiter-Pluto events happened on June 30th, and that was after the June 5th lunar eclipse at 16 degrees Sagittarius. So that you can see this tie-in between these eclipses and these big planetary events. And for those of you that don't understand what eclipses are, they are the cosmos's way of doing a course correction, so to speak. We are evolving along a certain path, and if you kind of get out of your lane or off course, the eclipses come along to help move you back on course to whatever that evolutionary path is. Now, the final 2 eclipses on the Cancer Capricorn axis occurred on June 21st at 0 degrees Cancer and July 5th at 14 degrees Capricorn. So you see this second Jupiter-Pluto event happened right in between this eclipse on June 21st and the July 5th one. So all of this Cancer Capricorn energy was really infusing this second Jupiter-Pluto event in Capricorn. And now the third Jupiter-Pluto event that just happened, it's occurring before the lunar eclipse on the Gemini Sagittarius axis that's going to happen this month at the end of the month on 11/30. So now we're bringing in, see, the energies of this new vision, right? The new ways, the new vision of what things are going to look like, that Gemini Sagittarius axis that's been encoded, it's been being seeded into this Jupiter Pluto event with this upcoming lunar eclipse. Because keep in mind that these eclipses have a window of 6 months prior and 6 months after. So they have a long-term effect in terms of getting our course correction really fine-tuned. And then at the end of the year, Saturn and Jupiter are going to conjunct at 0 degrees Aquarius on the winter solstice. The winter solstice happens at 0 degrees Capricorn. So that aspect between the solstice point and this Saturn-Jupiter conjunction, that's a 30-degree aspect, which is known as a semi-sextile. And so that's a very, very harmonious. These are two BFFs working together to encode this Saturn-Jupiter conjunction right there in Aquarius, which is the sign of that liberating big picture for the collective consciousness of humanity in service to humanity on the global stage. And so it's going to be activating that radical and liberating vision of just exactly how we are going to build back bigger and better. So here at Saturn-Pluto conjunction at January 12th, we're asking these questions. And by the end of the year, December 21st, the answer to the question is able to show up. Because remember, the problem and the solution are two different frequencies. But the moment you have the problem, the solution simultaneously shows up. Just like the moment you have the question, the answer simultaneously shows up, but they're two different frequencies. So we've had to spend this entire year shifting from this frequency into what's now coming as this higher frequency, so that we can see that new vision, so that we can see that solution.
I understand from various readings that I've done is that the solstice, like you have here, it's going to be a major turning point in the collective, how we are going to build our lives from that point on. It'll be very difficult for anyone to not feel that. So
absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And it's because this Saturn-Jupiter conjunction is happening on that day. And that's why they're saying that the solstice is that turning point.
That will be good.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah. And this is going to be the first time that Saturn and Jupiter are meeting in Aquarius, because Jupiter's been in Capricorn all this time. Saturn paved the way for Jupiter and Pluto to come through Capricorn, but Saturn already segued into Aquarius and then came back into Capricorn to kind of share that vision that she got while she was in Aquarius with them, to help them with this unfolding work. And so now she's returning back to Aquarius, and Jupiter is coming right with her back into Aquarius. So it's kind of a beautiful thing to see how that little dance has happened between Saturn and Jupiter and Pluto in terms of this movement through Capricorn and then coming back into Capricorn and then back out into Aquarius again. Any other insights or comments you'd like to make about this third Jupiter-Pluto event?
No. Thank you.
I would just like to say that all of this that we're discussing here, these frequencies were encoded in that fifth gate activation for the sacred feminine, and they're being encoded here with Mars at puberty, with this Mars stationing direct. And this is significant, and we're going to see why when we get to the Mars at puberty slide, about why this encodement is so significant to this aspect in the sky for Mars. So before we do that, let's just take another look at kind of a review of this Aquarian Aries archetype, because in the past we've been dealing with the Piscean Aries archetype, which is known as the rugged individualist. And so now here we've got this Aquarian Aries archetype of the fierce protector. So just to kind of remind ourselves of how this fierce protector has, I would say, differentiated his identity from the rugged individualist, let's look through this. As the Piscean archetype, Aries wielded the sword of justice. And now as the Aquarian archetype, Aries, Mars is now wielding the flame of truth. This is a huge shift I would say a huge paradigm shift in terms of the dynamic of these two archetypes. The Aquarian Aries archetype is taking what has been made profane, what is profane, and is making it sacred. That is a huge piece of what the fierce protector archetype is all about. He is inspired by Shakti. Shakti is that Kundalini life force energy that all things are created from. And he's driven by passion. And we're talking about the holy passion that Shakti infuses. He is aligned with truth and right justice. He has a strong character. He leads with impeccable integrity. He is the embodiment of selfless love, and he expresses protective love. And as the Piscean archetype did as well, the Aries archetype is the protector of the tribe, who protects the innocent ones and defends what is right. And he defends us from the dark ones and those who would seek to do harm to the earth. So those two pieces of the Piscean archetype, Mars archetype, has come into this Aquarian Aries archetype. Any question about that? Just a good review to know what kind of energies we're dealing with here. Okay, so let's talk about Aries Mars at puberty. Daniel Gemario, who is the creator of this work around the Mars Synodic cycle, calls this the Mars at puberty stage. I've added the adolescence piece, and we're going to get into that now, and we're going to get into why it's important that third Jupiter-Pluto conjunction has been encoded in this stage of the Mars Synodic cycle. Now, Daniel says that this stage is where the archetype is dealing with the secrets and the wounds of the masculine. He specifically speaks about this in terms of men. And while you and I are women and not men, we understand that every person, man and woman, has an inner feminine energy and an inner masculine energy. So I've kind of tweaked this a little bit to just look at it from the masculine energy point of view. But if you're a man watching this, this might be very, very personal for you as a man in a way that it may not be as personal for myself or possibly Maureen. Having said that, there are a lot of women on the planet that are very, very identified with their masculine energy. And so this may be as personal to them as any man on the planet. So one of the secrets or wounds that the masculine energy has to deal with is their relationship to the feminine energy, and specifically for a man or a woman, to their mother. Particularly if your masculine feminine energy is out of balance and your masculine energy is more predominant, it will influence that relationship with your mother. For men specifically, and women have this too, this loss of cultural rites of passage. There are rites of passage that are specific to boys, and there are rites of passage that are specific to girls. However, both have lost these cultural rites of passage. And I believe, as a part of the eclipses that happened on that Cancer Capricorn axis prior to this Gemini Sagittarius eclipse season, that those rites of passage are going to be restored. And they may not look like the ancient rites of passage, but this is such a significant piece of our self-identification process that I believe that that's going to become restored to men and women, to the inner feminine and the inner masculine. Men specifically have been unconsciously living out their father's unlived life. But, you know, if you have a very strong father figure that overshadows your mother's personality, and again, if you have a strong inner masculine, and I'm speaking to women here, you too may be unconsciously living out your father's unlived life. Particularly if, let's say, I know a family that I grew up with, they had like 4 daughters, there weren't any sons. And so in a situation like that, or as an only child and you're the only daughter, these dynamics can set you up for being primed to be able to be kind of, what is the word that I'm looking for? Kind of pushed, I would guess, not primed, but pushed towards living out the father's unlived life. If you're an oldest child like myself, and I'm thinking very much of another friend of mine who was the oldest child of 5, and while she did have a youngest brother, this happened for her too, where the father puts these expectations on the oldest child, whether it's a boy or a girl. And so you get stuck in this pattern of unconsciously living out their expectations. And we get into what society's traditional definition of the masculine or being a man is. Then we have longing for the father and tribal fathers' ancestors. And this is especially keen when you're dealing with wounds in the family structure. So if there's a divorce in the family or an abandonment by the father in the family, this can happen really early at age where there's that longing. If the father passes away, and you know, when you're a child or in these formative years, there can be that longing too, because as you're really starting to come into knowing yourself, that role model is not there for you to look to or to even confide in. And so that longing can happen. I am very fortunate that because my grandmother and my mother started having children so young in their life, I actually knew several of my great grandfathers, and I cherished those relationships so much. A lot of people these days don't even know their grandparents, much less their great grandparents. And so here we're starting to get into this, you know, this lineage of the tribal fathers and the ancestors, and knowing who they are and what we are receiving from them. So we see here that just like the sacred masculine, feminine has been governed by fear due to patriarchy, that the masculine energy is also being governed by fear. And this is important to remember, that patriarchy is not the same as masculine energy. Sacred masculine energy doesn't look anything like patriarchy. Patriarchy is the sacred masculine energy that has been made profane. And so it's no surprise that those that hold pure masculine energy within them are also being governed by fear, because that is the result of what the patriarchy has done to humanity for the past however many thousands of years. Some people say 5,000 years, 10,000 years. I've even heard people say that patriarchy has been on the planet for 50,000 years. So it's been encoded, that fear, that fight or flight has been encoded in our DNA, and it is affecting the feminine energy as well as the masculine energy. And Daniel says that if the masculine energy is to heal, and we're talking here now about the inner masculine energy for men and women, we must activate within, which was, that should say not no, I'll have to correct that, not received from without. And we know that from working with the sacred feminine, it's the same concept. Now, this was an interesting quote that I found by Daniel related to these rites of passages. And he's talking about a one size fits all approach, not working to support the activation of the individual Mars example. And he gives this example. In some patriarchal African tribes, the puberty rite of passage sent all boys to the jungle with the instruction to bring back a lion. Return to the tribe was not permitted unless this was accomplished. In a culture that desires to have only warriors, this was an extremely effective technique. However, this also weeded out many other authentic expressions of masculinity. The warrior expression is not the only expression of masculine energy, but under the patriarchy, it has become the acceptable expression of masculinity. What would you like to add to this, Maureen?
Yeah, I was just thinking back over history, and where in the early civilizations, the Roman Greece, wherever, Spain, Portugal, the powers that be, it was all masculine soldier energy. I mean, that was their power. That was their ability to colonize. And so those particular themes have played out in all countries that I can think of up to this day. There have been countries in which there were warring tribes, one being less militarized than the other, but it seemed as though the military always won and always dominated the other. So that's a real interesting to see that shift. So far, I haven't seen it. I'm hoping that all of this will help to shift that energy and that masculine energy of the military being the dominant factor in any civilization's ability to be powerful and take care of their people. So it'll be interesting to see a new paradigm.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I heard you say that you're not seeing that yet. And when you said that, what came to mind is that in a subtle way, we are starting to see that, because our American troops men and women overseas have been being brought home over the past 4 years. And so I would venture to say that that in itself is a subtle shift in this, what is the phrase, might over right or something like that?
Mhm.
Are you familiar
Mhm.
with that expression?
Mhm.
And so,
Yeah.
go ahead.
Mhm. I agree that that would definitely put the emphasis more on the human than on their job, um, where they are expected to give up their lives for their country. That is the ultimate gift that has been perceived as the ultimate gift
Mhm.
that a country, a citizen can give is their life. Uh, that may
Exactly.
change. That,
Exactly.
yeah.
And I'm a very patriotic person,
Hmm.
and I remember as a child going to public school, you know, every morning we would start school by standing up and saying the Pledge to the Allegiance.
Hmm.
And for those that did not want to stand up and say the Pledge of Allegiance, we were told, we were taught, we were told, we were programmed that you must stand up and pledge to the flag, hold your hand over the heart, and say the Pledge of Allegiance, because that is a statement of honor for everyone before you that fought and died for this country. I
Yeah.
mean, that is a huge program to unwind, that we honor death in that way instead of sending our young men and women off to fight these wars that are nonsensical, right? There's always an agenda on both sides, and most people fighting those wars aren't even aware of the agenda.
Mm.
When is it that truth is going to be what we stand up and hold our hand over our heart for and honor as a
Mm.
legacy instead of these senseless deaths?
Yes, I agree. I would
I think
love that.
I think that this is the shift between the Piscean Aries archetype and the Aquarian Aries archetype. No
Mhm.
more might over right. That rightness, right action, and truth will be the prevailing force that can be honored moving forward.
Yes, that's important.
So, as I was looking at this stuff that Daniel identified, and not being a man, some of this I could not really tap into and relate with to. I can definitely tap into the wounds of the feminine, but tapping into the wounds of the masculine is a little more challenging for me. And so I started to do a little bit deeper digging around, and it was this word puberty that kind of was tripping me up, because when we think about puberty, we're thinking about a biological um, expression that's happening within a young girl's body and a young boy's body. That's what puberty is. But during that stage of life, the physical, biological changes is not all that's going on. There's a lot going on emotionally, and there's a lot going on mentally, even like with the wiring of the brain and everything. And those kinds of changes are related to what's called adolescence. And those are the kinds of changes at this stage of life that I could more deeply connect with. And that's why I've added the adolescence piece here next to puberty, because
Yeah.
the biological changes isn't all that's going on there, especially when we're talking about the inner feminine and the inner masculine energy in terms of this stage of what's happening. So I started to look into, well, what's going on at adolescence, and what we have going on, which was the key word that I was able to tap into, is this identity development. Identity development over the physical body development, right? The biological development. And so I found some interesting stuff, because if we're going to try to connect with this Aries Mars at puberty phase, we've got to have something that we can connect with. And for me, being a Cancer ascendant, the emotional and psychological stuff is easier for me. May not be for everybody, but for me to be able to share this with you, I had to find something I could connect to, and this was the piece for me. And so when we're looking at this stage of life, because we're looking at the stage that the Mars archetype is going through, what we find is that teens seem disoriented, scared, and alone. And they also become moody, secretive, and sarcastic. And so because this is the time when they are searching for their identity. And a lot of the quote unquote behavioral issues that people talk about is all about the teen trying to separate their identity from their parents' identity in that self-identification process, where they're looking for who they are as an individual being from the mother and the father. And so this particular professor of psychology has come up with these 5 ways in which the teens in this stage of their life demonstrate the struggles with identity. And that's, again, a key word, that as we're looking at this Mars at puberty phase over this next month, what can we anticipate dealing with? And so we're looking at how the Aries Mars identity is shifting from the Piscean archetype to the Aquarian archetype. Can you see, Maureen, how that is a self-identification process of its own for that archetype?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So these are some interesting things that the doctor came up with: status symbols, forbidden behaviors, rebellion, idols, cliquish exclusion. I mean, we've all experienced this. We all went through this stage in our life. But in terms of really understanding what we're going to experience in a transformational way within our own inner masculine, to me, this identity development is going to be really important. And you can see here that it's based on relationships and feedback received from others. And so for me, our group session and even our personal sessions are going to be really significant to help with this identification of what the Aquarian Aries archetype is developing into and identifying itself as, because we'll be giving that kind of feedback to each other through those private sessions and group session.
Mm-hmm.
What is your thought on that in terms of this whole Mars at puberty?
Yeah, I like the adolescence word you added also, because puberty to me just simply means that we have moved into a phase when we're thinking about reproducing the species. That's an instinct to me.
Mm-hmm.
So women, their bodies will be changing. They will be getting their moon times, and boys, their voices change and crackle, and they become more interested in sex and how that might apply to them.
Okay.
So adolescence is very different, like you said, like all of these different things
Hmm.
that you have listed here. It's very interesting. I
Yeah,
like it much better. Yeah.
good. I'm good. I'm glad that you are able to connect with that the way
Mm-hmm.
I
Mm-hmm.
am. And so
Mm-hmm.
this is where I can then tie in the whole third Jupiter Pluto conjunction happening the day before Mars turned direct, which signifies this Mars at puberty, Mars at adolescence stage. Because all of those frequencies that we talked about that's been going on with Saturn and Pluto and Jupiter and Pluto, and now it's coming up with Saturn and Jupiter. All of those frequencies are a part of the encoding that is going to help the Aquarian archetype at this stage uh, go through that self-identification process, because that's going to be a part of its identity that was never a part of the Piscean Aries Mars archetype. Does that make sense to you?
Yes, for sure.
Excellent.
Yes.
Excellent. Okay. So now we've got the big picture for what the archetype stage is. And then we're going to be looking at how that kind of ties in with those different phases of the hero's journey that we went over in the first sacred masculine class. So as I mentioned earlier, this whole synodic cycle, this whole Aquarian Aries Mars archetype, even the hero's journey, this is new ground for us. As Capricorns, this is a new mountain that we are climbing, right?
Yes.
Yes. So,
Yes. I just point out here that my father is such an example of this. He is an Aquarian, and his energy is exactly like this. And I mean, I could practically chart the hero's journey through his life. Yeah.
wow, isn't that amazing?
It is. It is amazing. And
So,
that's why I think I feel his energy so
yeah.
strongly now.
Oh, wow. And so, like we demonstrated on that slide where I had the picture of the Kennedy brothers and Sasha
Mhm.
Stone, and we had talked about in the first class how they were embodiments of this archetype even before it came onto the world stage. Would you say that your father was probably even an embodiment?
I would, because he was almost the same um, generation as, well, JFK for sure. And well, all of them would probably be considered in the same generation. And that was his time also. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I would say he's very much the embodiment of it. Hmm.
Wow. That's spectacular.
It really is. And it was hard. In
Yeah.
a Piscean age, it was very hard for an Aquarian to embody that, as we can
Sure.
see through our examples that you've set.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, when we look at the stages of the hero's journey, remember that Campbell had these three stages: the departure act, the initiation act, and I'm not able to recall the name of the last act, but he had it in three acts. And then it got broken into 12 pieces that tied into those three pieces. So as I'm trying to blend all of this together, weave all this together, really understand it in terms of this Mars synodic cycle. And so I've been able to refine this since the first class. That's the point that I'm trying to get to. So we know right now that we're in the departure act. This is when the hero leaves the ordinary world. And how it was broken out, it was broken out into these 4 pieces, which I'm going to go over in just a minute. When we first talked about the ordinary world in which we meet our hero, I had kind of just relegated that to the phase 0 of the Mars synodic cycle, the conception, the incubation, and the gestation. It didn't occur to me at the time that also the birth of the new archetype, which we went through last month when Mars retrograde was opposite Sun, was also a part of this stage, this ordinary world in which we meet our hero. Well, yes, I mean, he's got to be birthed, right? So that you can meet him, right?
Right.
So, I mean, that was just a piece that I didn't see and didn't put together the last time. And what's important about this stage is, of course, the journey hasn't started yet, but it's about introducing us to the hero. And it lets us identify with him as a normal person before he becomes a hero in his normal at-home setting, before he goes out on the journey. So I've tweaked this. I've put that the phase 0 of the Mars synodic cycle is in this stage, and also phase 1, the birth of the new archetype, is in this stage as well. Then we go on to the second stage, which is called the call of adventure. We did a lot of work around that, talking about that in the first sacred masculine class, because that's really where I had kind of focused on the birth of the new archetype. But what we're seeing here is that the birth of the new archetype really goes from the ordinary world into the call of an adventure, in which the adventure starts. And so that is where the call to adventure is all about booting the hero out of their comfort zone, and they are confronted with a problem or a challenge they can't ignore. So we see here that the birth of the new archetype, which is one of the steps in the phase 1 of the synodic cycle, is in both of these stages. And now this month, where Mars is at puberty, at adolescence, where Mars stations direct, it's still a part of that phase 1 of the Mars synodic cycle. It's also a part of this call to adventure. And then it also then becomes a part of the next stage of the hero's journey, the refusal of the call. So can you see how last month event overlapped these first 2 steps in the departure act, and now this month's Mars event is overlapping these 2 steps in the departure act? Does that make sense to you, Maureen?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So what we'll talk a little bit more about in class today is this refusal of the call, because last class we talked about the call of adventure, but even though we're going to be focusing on the refusal of the call, remember that during this month, we are also still having this call of adventure. So if you haven't yet been confronted with a problem or challenge that you can't ignore, it may very likely yet, show up in this month, and then you'll have the opportunity to refuse the call. So in the refusal of the call, the hero digs their feet in. They don't want to take, they don't want to accept the call. They might refuse to go out on this path because the egoic mind is saying, are you a crazy nut? It's risky. There are perils out there. I don't want to have to deal with the spiders and trolls and dragons. So no way am I going to accept this call. So the call of adventure and the reviews of the call is what's going to be going on this month with this Mars at adolescence point on the Mars synodic cycle. Now, we still have another step in this phase 1 of the Mars synodic cycle, and that's when the Mars training and education is complete, And that is signified by when Mars returns back to the point in the sky where he was when the birth occurred, where, not when the, yeah, when the birth occurred, when Mars started to go retrograde. No, that's not right. I'm saying that wrong. Mars started going retrograde before it was opposite the sun. It's opposite the sun. It continues to go retrograde. Then it stations direct and it comes back. It passes the point where Mars was opposite the sun, but it goes all the way up to where Mars was in the sky when he first started going retrograde. So that's the point then where this Mars training and education is complete. And that's going to happen on December 16th. And that step in the synodic cycle is a part of this refusal of the call. And then it's also a part of this next stage in the Departure Act, the meeting of the mentor. So I wanted you to see how this whole phase one, that is really 3 different steps of phase one, tie into this Departure Act. But this is a little more clear than how I put this in the last class. Are you able to follow that, Maureen?
Yes.
Okay. And then we go into the phase 2 of the Mars synodic cycle. Remember, there's 6 phases to the Mars synodic cycle. And in the initiation act here, we see here the crossing the first threshold and the tests, allies, and enemies. So that will be the whole phase 2. So that's what we'll have be looking forward to. And what's interesting to me is that the Mars training education being completed happens in December. And then that same month, Mars starts this phase 2, the labors of Mars, and we'll have the first labor also in December. So we're going to have 2 things going on next month. We're going to be finishing the Departure Act and we're going to be starting the Initiation Act next month. Okay. Can you use your words for me, please?
Oh, sorry. Yes. I see
Okay.
that.
Thank you. Thank you.
Use your words.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. So yeah, so next month is going to be a huge, huge month for us. And going over the end of the phase 1 and the beginning of the phase 2. That's going to, I mean, imagine ending 2020 at this point in the Mars synodic cycle. I mean, talk about getting, whoosh, you know, I don't know, getting this energy just knocking you over. I mean, because look at it, the phase 1 is happening, the training and education is complete December 16th. That's before the solstice. But look at when the first labor happens, after the solstice on Christmas Eve. So this is about, you know, what would you say, about a week? What is it, 16 from 24? What is that? I can't even do math. 8 days, is that about 8 days? So a week apart, practically.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so that's going to be an intense time next year next month with the winter solstice and that Saturn Jupiter conjunction in Aquarius being sandwiched in between that whole week. Boom, boom, boom. So.
Yeah, I'm going to have to breathe.
Yeah, have to breathe, exactly. Because while all that's going on with Mars, then we're having our 6th Venus gate activation at the sacral chakra. So it's a lot to take in and process.
Yes. Just have to let it happen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yep. So I'm just going to let you know that I'm going to go back to the slides in the first Sacred Masculine class where I was trying to, map this out, this Mars synodic cycle with the hero's journey and trying to figure out how it all tied together. I'm going to go back now that I have a clearer understanding of how they integrate, and I'm going to refine those slides to so that they correlate with this. Okay.
Okay.
Excellent. All right. So at this point, we're going to be talking about the birth of the new archetype closure before we go into this month's activation. And so remember, it had the two pieces. It had the ordinary world piece and the call of adventure piece, right? Those two stages from the hero's journey. So this is the ordinary world, and we're using the Hobbit movie as an example. I don't know if you've read the book or seen the movie, but good, me too. So here in the ordinary world, remember Bilbo Baggins, he lives in the Shire and he's got his regular life that he enjoys. And now and then Gandalf comes in and throws up his, amazing fireworks, but that's about the most excitement they get there, right?
That's right.
So nothing unexpected ever happens in the Shire. It's just a beautiful, peaceful place to live. Some other examples of some other characters in their ordinary world phase would be when Luke Skywalker is living on the moisture farm prior to meeting Obi-Wan Kenobi, right?
Right.
In the movie The Matrix, you got Neo living life as Thomas Anderson, the computer programmer and hacker. And then in Ghostbusters, you've got the Dan Aykroyd and Bill Murray, and I can't remember the name of the other actor. They're just doing paranormal research at Columbia University. They're not really out there busting ghosts, are they?
No, they're not.
So it gives you a really good idea of how we get introduced to the characters in terms of, their real world personalities, lives, where they're working. And then you get the call to adventure. And so there are several ways that the call to adventure can happen. They can decide to go forth of their own volition. They can be sent abroad by a benign or malignant agent. They might stumble upon the adventure as a result of a mere blunder. They can be casually strolling when some passing phenomena catches the wandering eye and lures them away from the frequented path. And for Bilbo, it's when Gandalf has all of the dwarfs show up at his front door, right? Uninvited by Bilbo. They all show up there to have dinner because Gandalf has planned this meeting. And then they reveal to him that they want him to go along. And he's like, whoa, right? But that's where he gets his call to adventure, is when all the dwarfs are in his house and eating all his food and making a general mess of things. So.
Yes.
So has anything come up for you over the past month that you can clearly identify as this call to adventure stage for you?
For me personally, you mean?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, no, I can't think of anything right now.
Okay.
No.
Because these are the different ways that it might show up in your life. Doesn't mean they're the only ways, but it's going to be related to something unexpected happening for you that kind of turns things on end.
Okay. No,
so
not so far.
Not so far? Okay.
No.
So while this call to adventure stage is a part of the Mars birth of the new archetype, remember it's also the stage that's related to this Mars at puberty / adolescence. So you will probably be experiencing something over the next month since you haven't yet, that will really grab your attention and you'll say, aha, this is it. This is the unexpected thing that's turned everything upside down. And how am I going to deal with this? Am I going to put my head in the sand, or am I going to venture forth with it?
Mm.
All right. So the other part that happens this month with this Mars at puberty, adolescence, is the refusal of the call. Now, I took this information from this site here because it's really good information. So Campbell tells us that the hero must do a complete 180-degree turn by refusing the call and going back to the starting point. And so the question is, why is there this refusal of the call? What does this refusal of the call do to serve this journey? And because we know he must give in and accept the adventure at some point. So why not just skip this part and go straight into the journey? But the reason that this refusal of the call is so significant is that the refusal of the call makes who will become the hero a more relatable character, more human and not greater than human. So that's why this stage is really, really important. So no matter how exciting the adventure ahead might seem, no matter how terrible the ordinary world might be, leaving everything you know to face the unknown is scary. So this is a clue for you, Maureen, that when this unexpected event comes up and it seems like, whoa, things are starting to get turned upside down, the clue is that what I've known before and leaving it, no matter how bad it was, now seems scary.
Mhm.
Okay, can I do that? I don't know that I can go there. The refusal also shows the vulnerability of our hero, his doubts and his fears. And showing the hero refusing this opportunity makes us reflect on the danger of the mission. Who will the hero have to face during his journey? Where will he go? How will he manage to get there? And what does he have to find? We know from our time in France that we got into it and then we're like, I wouldn't have signed up for this if I had known that this was going to be this way. And so keep that in mind as you're going to be getting the call, that it could look like what happened in France, where we were going along, we had the call, but we didn't really know what the adventure was going to look like. We didn't have all the information, did we?
No, we did not.
Right. And so on a conscious level, we didn't really have the opportunity to refuse the call. But once we got there and we got clear on what the adventure was all about, we're like, wait a minute, this is not what I signed up for. So that in itself became the refusal of the call. So I'm just pointing that out because I want you to be able to recognize the different ways and how it may manifest for you personally. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So the refusal of the call will occur in all the adventures. I mean, there will be a point when the hero will say, I have to think about this,
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
So it usually happens, right? I mean,
it does happen, not usually happen.
It does
happen, but how it happens and what it looks like and what it feels like, and
Mm-hmm.
is going to be personal for each individual, just like what we experienced when we went to France last year
Yeah.
doesn't really fit the mold of what they're describing here. And that's
No.
why I'm bringing your attention to that, so that
Okay.
you can be more aware of
Yeah.
it may look differently than what you're anticipating.
Yeah. Because I'm thinking of my father, and his call to adventure was the war. And he did not at any point refuse the call. And neither did most of the men who went. Of course, when they got there, they may have experienced the same thing that we did. Like, this is not the glorious war I had envisioned. Um, you know, it's ugly. And then they come home and they don't talk about it. So the next war, which there seems to always be one, um, those people that are called may not understand the negativity involved with what they are being called to do or to answer, um, which goes back to the same thing we did before, the military might. Um, if you're not a part of that, then you're an enemy. So yeah,
Yeah.
I have no idea how to bring that into myself yet.
Right. So the key pieces that I'm hearing here is that in terms of who you are as a being, it
Mm-hmm.
seems dangerous, it seems risky, it seems to be a stretch too far that you aren't willing to know. And I mean, if you think about Bilbo Baggins' trip when he finally does agree to go with the dwarves, they could have never anticipated all the things that showed up on their path as they were getting closer and closer to smog in that mountain. Just like when we were in France, we could have never anticipated all the things that were going to show up for us. You know, you in the cave with the Templar warrior,
Mm-hmm.
you know, me at Caribou and dealing with that past life experience. I mean, we just can't anticipate it, but there's something within you that perceives with trepidation that it's a stretch too far. If I go over this threshold, I'm, you know, there's no going back and I'm not going to be the same.
Yes. Okay.
So this is good. This is really good here. The refusal of the call stops the story to make us think about what really is at stake. And without this stage of the story, the hero might come off as arrogant, or worse, the mission he must accomplish might appear as an easy task. So this is the big thing. The refusal of the call exists to show the hero's doubts, fears, and insecurities, and to make him more relatable. So as that comes up for you, you'll be able to recognize it. That's the whole point that I
Yes.
want to make for you, is how to recognize it when it comes up. And so when you
Yeah.
tell me, no, last month I did not get the call to adventure. Well, you know, you
I
have to
may
have the
have.
call in order to be able to refuse it. So
Yes. And, again, it may have been without getting into the details of it, would be the schism within politics, uh, where you're going to stand on that. That might, in effect, be something to consider for me, because it's not a comfortable place to be where you are where you are at odds with what is normal within this country regarding politics, what's going
right.
on. That's a big one, actually, when you think about it. But I don't know if that's my call. That's the only thing I've experienced, and possibly the refusal
Mm-hmm.
might be in there somewhere.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Just an idea.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm, as you're talking about that, I'm thinking back over what I shared with you in terms of what I suspected might be my call to adventure.
Mm-hmm.
And what's interesting is, when I told you that I found out that the police had lost my sworn statement, and now I have
Yes.
to do it again. And my son said something interesting to me. He said, "You could just let it go."
Mm-hmm.
He said, "But they don't know that you fight to the death." And I thought, whoa. And so am I going to go ahead and keep pushing and fight this, or am I going to let it go? But I'm just made that way. I have to keep going. And I think that incident that I described to you really was the call to adventure.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact now
Mm-hmm.
that I'm pursuing this,
Mm-hmm.
uh, because it's been in my mind, I could just let this go. But there's something inside of me saying, no, don't let it go. You need to keep going forward and getting, pressing charges and, you know, keep going through. And maybe it'll be nothing more than what happened to me gets documented so that when it happens again, and it will, the next
Mm-hmm.
person will have an easier time because I've documented it, because nobody has documented it before me. And what happened to me is the MO of how this other individual, attacks people. And so because nobody's documented it before me, they didn't want to take it serious. And
Yeah.
so
Yeah,
now
I
I
understand that.
document it, the next person that it happens to, and there will be a next person, will be able
Sure.
to have it taken seriously and maybe more substantial repercussions and protective measures will come
Mm.
about.
Yes.
So I'm kind of feeling like that's been my refusal of the call thing. Do I let it go? I could let it go. Yes, I know I could let it go. The more I focus on this, the more upset I get. So just let it go. But
Mm.
no, I got to keep moving forward.
Yeah. Yeah, I understand that.
So we'll see. But so far, the events that are playing out right now seem, to me at least, to match the call to adventure and the refusal of the call.
Yeah.
We'll see. We'll see. But
Yeah.
that's the only thing for me that's coming up that I could relate to this.
Yeah.
Who knows? Maybe something completely different this month will show up for me.
Yeah.
It'll be more of a, yeah, this is it. I
This
thought
is
that was
it.
it, but this is it.
Yeah. No, me too.
Okay. So are you feeling good now about identifying the call to adventure and the refusal of the call stages of the hero's journey?
Yes.
Okay.
And it occurred to me that you can be split on this issue. Part of you is going to say no, and part of you is going to say yes. And you can follow through in a very secretive way. And that would be like a resistance.
Mm-hmm.
Um, if okay, let's say the Nazis are marching into France now, and France has a choice here whether they're going to stand up or whether they're going to lay down, and they all have different ways of responding to that, depending on their situation. So they all had an opportunity to join a resistance
Mm-hmm.
and fight from within in a secretive way and pretend that they were just normally going about their business. And that, to me, that's more Scorpio. That's the way I do things. And so that may be something too that I need to look at, if that is indeed a cop out. You know, I don't know. I think sometimes it's important that you can do that, that
Yeah.
you have to be secretive. But it's a whole area for me that I've dealt with a lot in my life.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. With that Scorpio ascendant, I can understand that. Well, and
Yeah.
think about those resistance movements. There were
Hmm.
the resistance movements because if they got caught,
Yes.
it was a life and death situation. It was,
Yes.
imprisonment, it was torture, and of course it was
Hmm.
going to be death. And so,
Absolutely.
so
Mm.
today it would be, how would I experience a kind
Hmm.
of life and death situation? It may not be like a mortal life and death situation, but
Hmm.
within a relationship dynamic, within myself in terms of who I know myself to be and
Yes.
who would I be afterwards.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, that's all a part of this Mars at adolescent stage.
Mm-hmm.
How are you defining yourself, and how is that self identity being shifted, right? Coming away from what you have known yourself to be because your parents said this is who you are, and it's like, wait, I think I'm something different here. And now who is it that I really am? And so if you have a relationship dynamic where this is who you are in that relationship, but it's not true to who you are, you may find yourself differentiating out of being that identity in that relationship and
Yes.
finding out how you can be who you really are in
Yeah.
that relationship.
Right. Yeah, that's very much a part of it too, I think.
Yeah. So this next month is going to be intriguing at this stage.
Yes. I agree. You know, even Jesus in his call to adventure um wanted to get out of it a couple of times, and who could blame him towards the end, especially when he had an idea of what was going to happen. Um yeah, even he, when I went up on the mountain and prayed the night before, thought maybe if it's okay with you, Dad, we could just let this one go. What did he say? If this cup could pass over me, he said something like that, you know.
Yeah.
But not my will, thine be done.
Right.
um,
That's
it's
an
always been a comfort to me that he would go ahead.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
I said it's always been a comfort to me that he had that very human feeling of, you know, understanding what he had to do, but not really wanting very badly to do it. And I mean, it was a very human thing for him to do, you
Mhm.
know, just to ask.
Right. Well, and I
Yeah.
love I love that quote that you just made, not my will, but thy will.
But
And
thine
I
be
think that
done.
that
Yeah.
really relates to this refusal of the call stage
Hmm.
when you realize, you know, I have to go. And so it's kind of in a higher power's hands, but I have to go.
This is my mission. This is my responsibility. And
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Thanks for
Mhm.
that. All right. So what's next here? The aspects.
Mhm.
So we've got a T square here. And what's interesting is we've got this Mars Aries retrograde conjunction still in Aries. Remember that this aspect was very much a part of the birth of the new archetype. And this time, instead of being opposite Sun Sekhmet, look at who Mars and Eris are opposite. They're opposite the sacred feminine, Venus. So remember when we talk about oppositions, how we are blending the energies, right? The polarities of these energies, we're bringing them up to a higher frequency to manifest something new at this higher frequency. So this is very, very significant that at this puberty stage, that this really does demonstrate how that old Piscean Aries archetype, which is very much rooted in patriarchal energy, is being shifted into this Aquarian Aries archetype, because the Aquarian Aries archetype has the balance of the masculine and the feminine, the sacred masculine and the sacred feminine. Very different. And the T square brings in this, I told you, is totally encoded here, right? The Jupiter, Pluto conjunction, Pluto, Saturn at the beginning of the year, and then Saturn, Jupiter at the end of the year. This Pluto, Jupiter, Saturn dance that's been happening in these last degrees of Capricorn. And so remember, with the T square, you've got two 90-degree angles. And those aspects in astrology are a square. Squares are breakthroughs in consciousness. So we've got two breakthroughs in consciousness here being offered to us. Are we going to step across the threshold? We can refuse the call and not step across the threshold, or we can, step across the threshold and have the breakthroughs in consciousness. Breakthroughs in consciousness about our own inner balance between our masculine and feminine, to mirror the balance of the sacred masculine and the sacred feminine in the cosmos, represented by Yeshua and Magdalene. And I love that Aries is a part of this, the goddess of radical truth. This goddess of radical truth is telling us that this is where we are supposed to be headed. And if you don't step across this threshold, you're going to be left behind. And then Venus, on her end of the polarity there, of the top of the T, she's being propped up by the North Node in Gemini through this trine. So this is telling us that this is exactly where the collective consciousness of humanity is evolving towards. This balance, this sacred partnership between the masculine and the feminine. And that partnership, that sacred partnership, is going to be all about the bigger and the better that's going to be showing up with Jupiter and Saturn at 0 degrees Aquarius. That void that we've created within us over the course of this year is being filled by this sacred partnership. That's what's rushing in. The archetype of divine creation that was downloaded at the seat of Isis, that's what's rushing into the void that's been created this year through the 3 Jupiter-Pluto conjunctions and the Saturn-Pluto conjunction at the beginning of the year. And it's rushing in on this day of solstice when Saturn and Jupiter are at 0 degrees Aquarius. Isn't that amazing?
Yes, it is.
I'm super, super excited. I keep repeating, that's why I said, I can't remember which class it was, no matter what happens in this election, do not attach to it, because something positive is coming out of it.
That's good to know.
Yeah. So then we have another opposition here, Chiron and Magdalene. Of course, Chiron is the cosmic shaman. Magdalene, she's part of that archetype of divine creation as the beloved of Yeshua. She's that Sophia consciousness. And so you think about the Sophia consciousness on one side, and you've got the cosmic shaman on the other, and they're bringing their frequencies up to create something at a higher point. The Sophia consciousness is a huge part of this divine archetype of divine creation that is being encoded that people haven't connected with yet. Because in the church, whatever you want to identify as the church, the sacred feminine has been removed. And so while people are very, very familiar with the concept of Christ consciousness and Christed beings, they're not familiar with the Sophia consciousness that is the other, right? The other side of the coin, the two hands that wash each other. And so this Sophia consciousness is, and the shamanic medicine of this Sophia consciousness is very much being embedded in them so that it can be like an equal footing between receiving the Christ consciousness that they're familiar with and the Sophia consciousness that they're not so familiar with, right? Bringing that together.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what's interesting here is that the cosmic shaman is being supported by Medusa and Asmodeus. Well, we know with Medusa, we're looking at those paralyzing fears. And what did Daniel say about the wounds that are happening with the masculine at this stage? That they are stuck in fear. And so those fears have to be brought to consciousness. Asmodeus is the one that's showing us where those demons are. And we see that it's in Leo, the compassionate heart. And so this trine of energy from Aries of self-love to the compassionate heart to help heal those paralyzing fears and be able to let go of those demons. And then the Magdalene having this trine to where the lunar eclipse is going to happen on November 30th in Gemini. Remember what we said about these eclipses. They are course corrections for humanity in terms of their evolutionary path. And that goes back to what I just said about the fact that humanity understands Christ consciousness, but not so much Sophia consciousness. And so this lunar eclipse trine to the Magdalene is doing that course correction so that when they receive this archetype of divine creation on the solstice, the Christ consciousness and the Sophia consciousness are on that even keel for them.
Okay.
And then we have Uranus retrograde opposite Mercury and the moon. So we know that we're doing this vision quest with the Uranus retrograde. And now we're going to be receiving some kind of message from the Great Mother about that peace that we are looking for, that we are, going back to find. We're going to get a message about that. And it's going to be related to that message that we're going to receive from the Great Mother is going to be related to receiving this archetype of divine creation, this Christ consciousness, Sophia consciousness archetype that's going to be received into this void that we've created. So this is going to be really exciting to see what message is coming forth about that. And remember that the message is going to be very liberating for the collective consciousness of humanity. And we're in Taurus here. It's going to be something, it's going to be a medicine that is going to be embodied by the collective consciousness. And then the last aspect we have, this is huge. We've got Juno, the goddess of sacred partnership, the sun, Sekhmet, Merlin, and Arthur, two of our heroes in Scorpio, trine Hercules retrograde, Neptune, and Yeshua in Pisces, our other heroes, Yeshua and Hercules. So we've got our heroes doing this harmonious support of each other in these water elements. So we're talking about deep emotions that are going to allow us to tap into that unity consciousness, merge into that oneness field. The heroes on our journey are helping us to do that.
Okay.
Okay.
And this grounds on November 30th, right? Did you say that? That's when that happens?
Well, so just yesterday, Friday, the 13th, was when this whole piece of the Mars synodic cycle became active, and it's going to be active for the next month. The piece here, with the lunar eclipse happening on the 30th, is going to be a huge shift for us because of this Sophia consciousness becoming more, let me find a word. It's going to be more present. The presence of the Sophia consciousness is going to be more in the awareness field that this trine here is going to allow people to access. Did I say that right for you to understand it?
Yes, thank you.
So this water trine here is opening people up to be able to receive the awareness of this Sophia consciousness and to help them course correct their evolutionary path.
Okay.
Did I say it better that time?
I got it. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. So let's look at the chart. I'm looking at the clock here because I know you've got a timeline. How are we doing on your end?
Let's see. What is it?
It's 7 here, almost 7 here. So that means it's almost 4 there. So we're good, right? We're good on time.
We're good. Yeah, okay. We're good.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
So this first aspect is in green. The Mars Aries opposite Venus, the T-square to Pluto, Jupiter, and Saturnia, and the Venus trine to North Node. So let's see that. Here we are. We got Aries and Mars opposite Venus. We've got their T-square over here to Pluto, Saturn, and Jupiter. And we got Venus's trine to the North Node. Okay, so that's the green one. The next one is, hold on, orange. So that's Chiron opposite Magdalene. Okay, so here's Chiron up here in Aries. Yep. What?
I said yes. That's okay. Yeah, I see it.
Opposite Magdalene in Libra. Okay, and then you've got this Chiron trine from Aries to Leo to the Medusa and Asmodeus. Okay.
Okay.
Then the blue one here, this is the Uranus retrograde opposite the Mercury and Moon in Scorpio. And then finally the purple one, we've got Juno, Sun, Segment, Merlin, and Arthur. All of those are in Scorpio, trining Hercules retrograde, Neptune retrograde, and Yeshua in Pisces. There's that one. Okay. So what we see here, sorry, the really super, super duper powerful energies, these Aryan energies, we've got 2 aspects that are initiated in Aries, and these Scorpion energies, right? 2 powerful aspects initiated in Scorpio. And then look at this Libra. We've got, again, 2 other powerful aspects being initiated here in Libra. So these Aries, Libra, Scorpio energies are really super duper powerful. during this whole cosmic dance that we see going on this chart. Now, tomorrow is the new moon in Scorpio. So that's at 23 degrees, and it's conjunct Sekhmet here. Sekhmet is at almost 24 degrees there. Or, no, I'm reading that wrong. Let me put on my glasses. Yeah, 23 degrees. Oh, look, Sekhmet's at 23 degrees, 14 minutes. This new moon is at 23 degrees, 17 minutes. Just a 3-minute separation there. That's where the new moon is happening. And it's happening 2 days after the activation of the Mars being at puberty.
Okay, so my new moon is today. I'm trying to think of when it started. And I know that England, it's the 15th because they're ahead of us. So at your at you, what time? Oh, I'm sorry, I'm blithering on. I can't find my book. I had my book that told me when. Anyway, it was today, Pacific time.
Well, I will tell you, I don't have a published book. I follow the website called Ruby Slipper Astrology. Every year she picks up the new moons, the full moons, and the eclipses.
Oh, okay. All right.
So she has it, actually, she has hers on October 16th. I'm in the wrong month, sorry. November 15th. November 15th. I don't know where in the world she's located. So I always use her dates, but you're right, because of time changes, it could be different.
Yeah, that might be because my I use WeMoon, and she has it today at 9:07 p.m. That's my time. So
and so for me it'll be
so that would put you you are the 15th. And I am the 14th.
Yeah, that's good. Thank you for pointing that out. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Well, and remember, you know, these energies are fluid. They're not static. So
right.
Always this, you know, what we call a window of when you're really being activated by them.
Yeah. Is it a day before and a day after, or do you see that differently?
You know, I've always just focused on the full moon, and we know that's 3 days before, the day of, and 3 days after. I would use that same window on a new moon. Other people might do it differently. Just like with the eclipses, you've got all kinds of eclipses. You got lunar eclipses, you got solar eclipses, you have total eclipses, you have annular eclipses, you have partial eclipses. But the windows are 6 months before and 6 months after, regardless. So I mean, if you have another preference, you know, that's fine. That's fine.
Yeah, I just try to use the energy pretty close to the day of, and that's not always possible, but
yeah, certainly that's when it's most potent. But for people who like to do ceremony, you know, anytime within those windows is great for doing ceremony.
Absolutely. Yes.
Particularly depending on your own personal schedule. You're not able to do it on one day, but you can do it on the next day, you know.
Yeah.
So I wanted to show you here this full moon lunar eclipse at 8 degrees of Gemini. It will be right about here. But remember, one of the aspects that I gave us, and I don't normally put these kinds of aspects on, but because this is an eclipse, I did, especially because this 8 degrees of Gemini is trining this 9 degrees of Magdalene. And see, it's 8 degrees, 45 minutes. Remember what we said, anything at over 31 minutes would be rounded up to 9 degrees. Anything below 30 minutes is rounded down to 8 degrees. So you could essentially say 9 degrees of Gemini, and this is at 9 degrees and 6 minutes. So it's a fairly close, closely aspected trine from the lunar eclipse to Magdalene. And I love how this eclipse is bringing the Magdalene and her Sophia consciousness into the realm of humanity's awareness as a part of this shamanic medicine. You know, shamanic medicine in Aries is self-love. And so who better to help with that medicine than the Magdalene and the Sophia consciousness? So that's what they look like on the chart. So here they are the themes, each one of the aspects. We have several relationship paths being activated with this T square. We're having the path of conscious equal partnership being activated not only by the T square, but it's being activated again here with this Chiron opposite Magdalene. So 2 separate aspects in Aries and Libra. Remember I showed you up here on this chart, right? The green one, orange one, the green one, and the 2 separate aspects activating this path, relationship path of conscious equal partnership. That's pretty spectacular. And really, from my perspective, it even demonstrates that the partnership is sacred because the 2 are becoming one. So there's 2 aspects there. Are you following that analogy that I'm making?
Yes.
I think that that's pretty auspicious.
Yeah, I agree.
So here are the key words for the signs and the luminary bodies that are being activated during the T square and the trine. And these are the keywords for this Chiron opposite Magdalene, the eclipse. Remember, it's an evolutionary course correction. And Medusa and Asmodeus there.
Yes.
And then because this particular opposition includes Chiron, the cosmic shaman, I'm giving you the shamanic medicine for each of these signs, Aries, Libra, Leo, and Gemini, because all of them, through their connections, oops, I'm going the wrong way, are at play. So with Aries, you've got the self-love and personal identity. This goes back to that Sophia consciousness, people being able to now identify with that Sophia consciousness. Libra, openness to loving and being loved no matter what. I love that that's the energy that Magdalene is in the sign of equal partnership, right? Leo, speaking truth, honoring creativity and inspiring others' expression. And Gemini, trusting intuition or telepathic abilities. So really being open to your inner guidance is that Gemini medicine. You know, that inner guidance is, as we talked about before, your soul, what people call your soul, or what people call the higher self, that part of you that is the extension of the source field, the oneness field. And so being able to receive guidance and inspiration from that field and being able to trust it is a huge piece of being able to work with these archetypes.
Yes.
And then the Uranus opposite Mercury moon, that's the path of intensity. And the really lovely thing about this path is that any relationships on this path are there to refuel you and recharge you. And if they're not refueling you and they're not recharging you, then that's a big clue that they're not the relationships for you when you're walking on this path or when this path is being activated in this way.
Okay.
And then this huge trine. So I just want to take a moment here, because they're new to us, to look at these heroes that are being pulled in. Merlin, Arthur, and Hercules. So with Merlin, we're dealing with the cosmic magician, the warrior priest, the prophet, the advisor.
Yes.
He is the seeker and discoverer of occult knowledge. Arthur has to do with the cosmic law, that which created order in the universe out of the chaos. Dharma, the power of duty, virtue, morality, preserving and maintaining righteousness. And remember, we discussed how Arthur represents the awakened being, because the myth is that to be able to pull Excalibur for the stone,
Yes.
it takes an enlightened being to do that.
Right.
And then Hercules, it's retrograde. So we're looking at these inner energies here, the inner divine strength,
Mm-hmm.
inner worthiness.
Mm-hmm.
Hercules is a cosmic role model to show us that what he can do, what he did do, we can do too. Those prodigious feats. And when, of course, you step on to that call, that path of the call, and you have to go through those labors, it's going to require some prodigious feats to get through those labors.
Yes.
And then for Hercules, as a myth, it was the exaltation after his death. And I'm kind of redefining this exaltation as being, that ascension process that we're all going through, our own personal exaltation.
Yes.
Okay, so here you see I left the Vision Quest opportunities blank, but that's because I was really trying to get a grip on what is this piece about Mars at puberty / adolescence all about. So looking at the aspects and understanding that better, let me go up here where they're all on the same page.
Yeah.
What kind of vision questing opportunities can you see in terms of working with these aspects?
Well, I had been doing what you had suggested before, was finding a hero that interests you, and plotting the parts of the myth or the story that would be representative of the various steps of the hero and his journey. And I haven't broken it down completely yet, but I've been working with an Irish hero called Cuchulainn. No, I've heard about him so much. And his name is Cuchulainn. And he was born a regular man, and he had a different name, and he earned his other name through this call to adventure. And so I was beginning to study that a little bit, and I kind of liked that. Another easy one is Ulysses for me, because I've read the book and I know the story. Jason and the Argonauts looking for the golden fleece, and I like to pick those kinds of things because I grew up with those stories.
Yeah.
And just see where they were. All the steps of the hero.
Right. And which step ties into which piece of the story?
Exactly. Yeah. Where was their ordinary life, and what did that look like? And then what was the call to adventure? And it made a lot of sense to me when I started tracking these heroes that I'm familiar with.
That's really good. And so building on that concept, the next step would be then, for those heroes that you've identified that you resonate with, then finding out what their refusal to the call was.
It would be very interesting.
Yeah.
Yes.
So that's a really great vision questing
Yeah.
opportunity for you. Yeah.
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 Exactly. So I think maybe I'll continue with that and see what I can come up with.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
And so I would just, as I'm looking at this, a couple of them are coming to mind, so I'll mention them to you. So one is this lunar eclipse that's trining Magdalene. And so maybe being aware of how your relationship with the Magdalene or the shamanic medicine of self-love that the Magdalene and the Sophia consciousness is providing you, how that gets, let's say, tweaked, right, by the lunar eclipse, because the lunar eclipse is doing a course correction. And so how your relationship with that Sophia consciousness and the shamanic medicine of self-love that she demonstrates is being tweaked within you would be a kind of a vision quest.
Okay.
And the other would be, what kind of messages are you receiving from the Great Mother about, your relationship with her on this Taurus Scorpio axis, in terms of how you're being refueled and recharged by your relationship with her in new liberating ways that you haven't identified before.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yeah. So any final questions or answers that you have? That was a huge piece to take in. Feels really huge because it's so brand new to us, and we're just feel like such a baby exploring all of this. And
yes.
great.
Yeah. No, I've never, I grew up with the myths of the hero, and understood the stories, but applying it to an actual experience, as something that adds to collective consciousness is brand new. Absolutely. So I'm looking forward to that part.
How we had discussed before how, what was it? How many days were we in France last year?
I think it was like, let's see, we got there on the 8th.
It was less than 10 days, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think it was 8. We got there on the 8th, and then we left on the 16th. Yeah.
Yeah. So, that was such a compacted time, and we were able to identify these different stages of the hero's journey just in that 8 days. So I think another good vision questing opportunity would be looking at this year, 2020, right? In 2020 vision and that 2020 hindsight, and seeing how this year even applies to the hero's journey and the stages of the hero's journey.
Yeah, that would be interesting.
Okay, my dear.
All right.
Not today, unless there's anything else you'd like to add, any ahas that came up that you didn't, that are desiring to have a voice put around them.
No, I don't think so. I think this is good.
Okay.
Good to be going on with.
Good. All right, my dear. Well, then I'll see you next month, same place, same time, same place.
Same time. Yeah, absolutely. All right.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Ed.
Bye.
Bye-bye.